What is up, guys, and welcome to Q&A, the show where I take your questions from Twitter, link here, and YouTube, link you're already here, so hit that subscribe button and notification bell, and answer them here on this show in video format. We have a good amount of questions coming in today, and we're going to start with a regular from Giants Nation who says, "What's up, Quincy? Your favorite sub back at it again." And I see a lot of people are trying to be like me and give you these Harry Potter paragraphs. I don't think you invented the idea of paragraphs, Giants Nation, but I'll give you the credit, whatever. But my question is, do you think that the decade that was passed, so the 2010 decade, was the worst year for the quarterback? The bust that came in with Tim Tebow, Sam Bradford, Marcus Mariota, RG3, and Jameis Winston, who was your favorite college quarterback, and someone, Johnny Manziel also. Do you think that this decade was the worst for the QB position? I think the decade before it was the worst for the QB position. If you look at the drafts from the year 2000 up to the 2010s, there was a big lull specifically after 2004 till about, 2013, 2012. Well, not even 2013. 2012 had five quarterbacks drafted. Two of them, three of them became successful. And then there was a low in 2013, but 2014, 2015. So I would say from about 2005 to about 2014, those 10 years were really bad because that's when we saw the value of just an average quarterback skyrocket, because there were just no good young quarterbacks coming into the league at a consistent basis. Nowadays, this decade in the 2010s, since about 2015, it's been a lot easier to find a young quarterback, a lot more easy than it was to find it in that mid 2000s era. Because if you look at some of those drafts, like they're absolutely barren. 2007 is completely barren. 2008 had Vince Young for about a year. And I think like Jake Locker was 2010. There were just a lot of bad drafts for quarterbacks in between then. So I don't think this last decade was the biggest failure because, you had a lot of bust in the big name guys like RG3 and all that. But you also, you've had some very successful draft classes. I think 2018 is going to be proven to be successful. Already an MVP. You had Patrick Mahomes the year before with Deshaun Watson. Even Mitch Trubisky is a step up from anything that you got in some of those mid-2000s draft classes. And then, going back, you had Carson Wentz, Jared Goff. That's a solid class. So while Mariota and Jameis didn't turn out to be what they have, and the early 2012 draft class wasn't what it was hyped up to be, there still were a lot of really good draft classes out there. And I think there are more guys like Gardner Minshew who can come out the draft, who can play at a decent level, that might not necessarily be stars, but still can start. And I think we forgot that for a 10-year amount of time, like guys like Gardner Minshew were like rare. I mean, look at how much money Ryan Fitzpatrick got paid at the beginning of his career in Buffalo just because he was serviceable. So, I think this last decade has actually been one of the best decades to get a quarterback because it's been one of the decades that's had, I think, the most amount of young quarterbacks found. So great question. It's a very thought-provoking one. Let's move on to the next one. And this is from Predator Magnus, who says, "What do you think about Brady to Steelers?" I think it's impossible because the Steelers only have about $1.5 million in cap space. So I don't think that's happening. Also, for Tom Brady, I would go somewhere where I can impose my knowledge at the greatest level to mold whatever I'm going to be joining. And the Steelers have too much structure, too much infrastructure in the way that will kind of interfere with what Tom Brady would bring you. I think he needs to go somewhere where he can really mold at least his side of the ball. And that's why I think San Francisco is still the most probable spot outside of New England, but I don't think he's going to leave New England. The next question comes from the Vault Dweller, who says, do you think Andrew Berry will stick with his word and not worry about which GM drafted who? Now, every GM says this, right? We're not going to care. We're just going to care about good players and all that. But it's not realistic to assume. Now, if you're Andrew Berry, you only have 1 year that you weren't associated with the draft. So dumping everybody on the team that was drafted recently wouldn't make a ton of sense because his fingerprints are all over almost everybody who was drafted. John Dorsey did bring in some good players last year. Taki, Mac Wilson, Greedy Williams. Those are guys who are probably going to stick around because they're quality players. I think he'll stick to his word, but I think it's not a hard word to stick to when, realistically, he's been a part of almost all these drafts and, bringing in all the players that are here. As recently as 2018, Denzel Ward and all that. So, yeah, I think he'll stick to his word about not worrying what GM drafted who because he was a part of both regimes that drafted most of the players that were here. The next question comes from David Miner, who says, do you think the new guys will or won't go with Taki or Mac or draft someone or both? Or could they possibly re-sign Joe since they drafted him? If Joe's at a good value, they'll re-sign him. But I don't think Joe's going to come in at the value that they want him at. I think there are teams that are going to want him. Cincinnati, Pittsburgh might come a knocking for those two players. It would make a ton of sense. And I don't think the Browns are going to be willing to compete for a guy like Joe Schobert. So do I think they'll stick? I think they'll at least stick with Mac Wilson. He is a big-time player. Great athleticism, a lot of things that analytics guys like Mac Wilson has in spades. Sione Taki, that's a different question because he was very much a project pick by John Dorsey and Freddie Kitchens' coaching staff. So, his future is probably up in question, but I don't think Max is. So as long as you have the one guy there, you might keep Kirksey, but I think Kirksey's probably going. So probably draft another middle linebacker is what's in the cards for the Browns. The next question comes from Kurisu X, who says, since the Browns are drafting in a fairly decent spot, what type of player do you think they should be looking for with their first pick? Should they draft an offensive tackle or some D-line help? If possible, what is your opinion? They gotta get the offensive line help if there is good offensive line help available at 10, which there should be. So yeah, I would side with getting the offensive line help, getting Baker Mayfield protected, and making sure there's no excuses why this offense can't reach its potential. Because last year they didn't, and it cost the team a ton of games. So this year they're going to need that offense to reach up to their potential. This next question comes from John Rankin, who says, which player position do you think the Browns need to upgrade the most? And what available free agent would fill that role? Probably safety. I think they need some veteran safeties because I don't think Sheldrick Redwine is going to be it, and I don't think Demarius Randall is going to be back. Now, some people have mentioned Eric Berry. I would probably go along the lines of getting a veteran like Eric Rowe, or even try to get somebody like Jimmy Smith who's older and see if they want to play safety. So I would go in that direction. I would get some veteran DBs on this team. I think that's what this team needs a lot. The next question comes from Older God, who says, after they fired Freddie, didn't Jimmy say the next head coach would have to have head coaching experience? Seems to me we've got a head coach, DC, and OC who don't have any real experience at those positions. Joe Woods had 2 years of coordinating experience in Denver, where he had the 5th and 11th ranked defenses, respectively, which is actually better than Steve Wilks' experience as a coordinator. I think Steve Wilks' second year of defensive coordinating experience was in Cleveland last year. But most of the way Steve Wilks was the defensive backs coach. So you got more experience there, defensive coordinator. Joe Woods, very respected name. Alex Van Pelt, the offensive coordinator, Not a ton of offensive coordinating experience. I do believe he had 1 year in Buffalo, but he didn't do well. That was very early in his career. I think 2009, he had the 29th ranked DVOA offense that year. So not great there, but he is one of the most well-respected QB coaches. I have had people reach out to me telling me how great Alex Van Pelt was and how upset they are that he left the Bengals or, that he left Green Bay. So I hear a lot of great things about this guy. Maybe it's just time for him to get an opportunity. And obviously we knew going into it that Kevin Stefanski was going to be, inexperienced relatively compared to other guys. Now, there have been people with just as little experience of Kevin Stefanski that have done fine. There have been people with more experience than Kevin Stefanski that have tanked horribly. So, experience is not always going to be the key, but it is something that, you can put your hat on at this point of a hire. What I will say is that this is kind of what we knew we were going to get with Kevin Stefanski. We knew that Kevin Stefanski did not have, 30 years of NFL experience, so he wasn't going to be able to bring in these ultra, experienced guys to be offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator. We knew that we were going to be taking a risk on some newer, younger, fresher faces when they went with Kevin Stefanski. That just is what the deal is with him. Hopefully it works out for the Cleveland Browns. Am I concerned? They got Bill Callahan also. He's an offensive line coach. Most famously was the coach that played against John Gruden when John Gruden got traded to Tampa Bay in the Super Bowl. He was the head coach of the Raiders at the time. The next year they tanked really bad, and then he has been the assistant head coach in Washington, and even took over as interim head coach over there. So you have some experience so far. Let's wait to see what they fill out the defensive staff with too. But no, this is not the experienced latent team that the Browns, that a lot of Browns fans thought they were getting. And to me, it makes me wonder if they thought the problem wasn't the experience on hand, and they thought the problem was the functionalness of the organizational structure. Because if you look at those two things, they really didn't address experience this offseason. They addressed the organizational structure. So it seems like from those inside the building that was the most important part to fix, and they feel like they fixed it. Now, we'll see come September if that's true, but this is the route that they were going in. The next question comes from John Stopar, who says, what is the biggest disappointment? The 2019 Browns or 2011 Eagles dream team? That's a good question. I would say, let's see, the dream team. I don't know, man. That's a tough one, because here's the difference between the dream team and the 2019 Browns. The dream team put that hype on themselves. They actually went out of their way to tell people how great they were going to be. The 2019 Browns, everybody just told people that they were going to be great. So I would say the dream team. The next question comes from Devin Posey. He says, think the Andre Drummond trade will affect the Cavs? Could they possibly make a playoff push? They're 9.5 games back from the 8th spot as of today. Nah, they ain't making the playoffs. But thank you for asking all these questions. That's going to be it for this episode of Q&A. If you like what I do here, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, ding that notification bell so you can be notified when I upload. But thank you guys for watching. Have a great day. Have a good night.